Professor, my name is Marlene Adams. Webster defined terrorism as the systematic use of terror, especially as a means of coercion. From that standpoint, when considering the question, is the U.S. government guilty of terrorism against the people of Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Panama, and other regions? I believe the short answer is yes. However, the totality of the circumstances is a bit more complicated. The United States took action against the people of each of these countries for its own gain, oftentimes using violence and intimidation. Specifically, the goal was never to take action in the best interests of Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Panama, or its people. Instead, the goal was simply American economic dominance and control at all costs. There are three important points that support the conclusion that the U.S. government is guilty of terrorism against the people of Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Panama, and other regions. One, war was a common statistic used to take over terrorists, forcing the people to surrender. Two, in some circumstances, the United States first sought to gain trust and then turn on so-called allies for its own gain. Three, the United States used their superior naval and army power as well as money to persuade these countries in giving up land and power. The situation in the Philippines is the best example of the United States terrorism in that country and portray both the first and second point, war and misplaced trust, as forms of terrorism. Importantly, but sadly, the United States first pretended to be a friend and ally of the Philippines. Emilio Aguinaldo, who was probably the major leader among the islanders, was strongly pro-American in the 1890s. He remained pro-American through the defeat of the Spanish fleet at Manila Harbor. The Philippine-American War was a very bloody conflict, and hundreds and thousands of Filipinos were killed. The type of war statistic used by the United States also caused the routine burning of communities and destroying crops. The United States betrayed the Filipinos, murdered them, and suppressed their independence. Looking back at the definition of terrorism is systematic use of terror, especially as a means of coercion. There is no doubt that in the Philippines this took place. The story of Hawaii and the U.S. takeover of that region is, although sad, a bit different. However, this is terrorism in a different form. Instead of violence, the United States used money and power to force the last Hawaiian queen to renounce her throne. Before the United States annexed Hawaii in 1893, it had been highly functioning for decades with its own parliament, flag, national anthem, and beloved monarch. A 13-member committee of white businessmen used their power, money, and influence, backed by the United States, to overthrow the monarch. Resistance in the form of a coup by native Hawaiian failed, and on September 6, 1895, after 8 months' imprisonment, the last queen of Hawaii was released on parole to Washington Palace. It would take another 2 years before her civil rights were restored. While in prison, the queen renounced her throne. So although no war occurred in Hawaii, the people were crushed under the economic power flexed by the United States to gain control. In Cuba and Panama, the United States used their superior naval power to dominate. For example, in Panama, the U.S. first supported the Panamanian and then, in exchange, bought the Panama Canal. In Cuba, the U.S. enacted the Platt Amendment to exercise control over Cuba. Overall, the United States is guilty of terrorism in many regions. Unfortunately, the sad truth is that the U.S. quest for economic and colonial power led to the downfall and suppression of many other nations. Thank you.